guys ready? Let's do this. All right, thank you for coming. And I'm Carol Engel Enright. I'm one of the co-founders of SOSSAS, the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service. And I'll introduce Mike in a minute. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Left Hand Brewery. Eric approached us several months ago, and we started thinking about what this could look like, how this could be a really wonderful forum gathering. The goal tonight is to be together, to just have conversation, to start into more civil kind of thinking, design thinking about how we can create a better community. And bring that forward with some people who have been in service in the community for a while. So I want to thank, is Jake in here? Jake and Eric, are you around? They just closed the doors. Is that what they did? Okay, we'll pull them in later. We're going to do this 8 times every other week with a different topic each week. Tonight we're just going to talk about the culture. What's happening in Longmont? How does it feel? Is it healthy? What's going on socially? What's going on economically? And what can we think of to make it better? So this isn't a forum, and Mike's going to do some teaching. He's going to take you through. We'll do a little bit of teaching each time we meet, and then our experts in the area are going to have a little bit of talk, and then we're going to open it up for question and answer and discussion and great conversations. Okay? All good? Okay. All right. Good information. So I'm just going to introduce you to Mike Butler. Most of you might know him already. He served this community for 26 years. My background is teaching. I come from teaching at CSU for 17 years in design thinking. I was designing products, teaching students how to design products, but also preparing students professionally for the industry, for going out on their own. And we brought a lot of those things to our SOSSAS training. Mike was the public safety chief in Longmont for 26 years, and the police and fire, and he's worked with the community. He loves this community. I just want to say we both love this community. We had chances to move out of it, and we didn't take those. We stayed here. And so we're vested in this 30 and 40 years as residents. So, Mike Butler, take it away.
Thank you, Carol. First of all, thank you all for being here, and welcome. And this is called Pints Perspectives. It's a relatively new format in terms of, at least in modern day time. It's a format that was used at one point by our founding fathers. Much of the information that got disseminated was through taverns. And they didn't have beauty salons back then where there's a lot of information now disseminated, but it was done through taverns. And a book named Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, was read at many of the taverns. Welcome. Come on in, folks. Find a chair if you can. There's chairs up here. We promised to be easy on you just because you're sitting up front. But anyway, I see most of you have a pint. And if you need to get a pint, feel free to take care of whatever business you want to take care of. But because the suds are flowing, I also want to let people know where the restrooms are at. And so if you walk out that door, Jake's not necessarily guarding it, but he's keeping it closed so the ambient noise from out there will not come in here. But if you walk out that door, go around to the bar, go around the bar, there's a set of stairs, hang a left, and then you will see men's and women's restrooms there. So whatever you need to do to grab beer, grab whatever you want to grab, or take care of whatever needs you have, feel free to do that. No concerns from our end in terms of what's happening. So we weren't sure who was going to show up, how many people were going to show up. There's 45, 48 chairs in this room, and people are still flowing in, so we may end up trying to get more tables. So anyway, but I just want to let you know how this evening's going to go, okay, real quickly. This is how Laurel, there's 2 chairs up here if you want to sit close up here. There's 2 chairs by those 2 gentlemen right there asking you 2 to sit with them. So anyway, thank you all for being here. Welcome. This is how this evening is going to go. And it's, again, called Pints and Perspectives. Now, we're going to have a perspective, and we're going to try to teach a few things that we teach in our SOSSAS classes. And then also every night, every other Thursday, the first one here is May 29th. The next one will be June 12th, June 26th. That will happen for 8 times. There are 8 different topics. All of them have some level of, not everyone's 100% certain how this should go. There's very many points of view along the continuum regarding many of these topics. And so part of our purpose here tonight is to elevate the nature of the conversation. We talk a lot about civility, creating evolved civility. We talk a lot about civil discourse. We talk a lot about harmonizing contrast. We talk a lot about finding common ground. We believe we can do that. Maybe not being done to the extent that it can, that's happening right now. But we believe we can do that, and our School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service are very much aligned with that thinking. Now, the way this evening is going to go is, as Carol said, I'm going to spend a few minutes, just talking about some things that kind of get the juices flowing around some various issues. And every time we meet, we'll be talking about that. And by the way, for 8 times, it'll be topic related. The last 4 times, we're going to have meet the candidates. And so anybody who's running for election, those last 4 times, this is the room we're going to do it in. We're going to still do a little bit of teaching from SOSSAS, and then we'll meet the candidates. And so that's what that's going to look like. So there's going to be 12 times that we're meeting. We would encourage all of you to come back. And so on Thursday nights, every other Thursday night, just put it on your calendar. So anyway, a few minutes by me with some teaching, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Carol, who's going to introduce 2 subject matter experts. For lack of a better phrase, that's what we're calling tonight. Brandon Schaefer and Tim Waters have agreed to be part of this session, and we'll have different speakers every other Thursday night. So you're welcome to come and listen to various perspectives on this. And so after that, the important thing I want to make real clear is that your perspective counts. You may hear me say often that your voice counts, your thoughts matter, your humanness is valued, your perspective is important. That's what we believe. We believe we need leaders in our community who are really tied into that. And so we need leaders. We certainly need leaders, but we may need them to show up differently in the future than they did in the past or present. And so that's, again, what this is all about. And so that's a big part of where we're headed. So Eric showed up. I don't know if Jake's still here, but I'd like to acknowledge Eric Wallace. Raise your hand. Maybe most of you know him. Eric is the mostly founder of Left Hand Brewery, and he agreed to offer his tasting room as a venue for the nature of these conversations. And so thank you again, Eric, for making this happen and for the cooperation we've had. He's attended a number of our SOSSAS classes over the last couple of years, and so we're happy to have this. So we have still people flowing in. Do we still have chairs? We need more chairs, or are we good? Okay, there's 2 chairs up here. Let people know. Okay. All right. I don't know how many of you can see this, but we prepared some questions that we would like for all of you to consider in terms of answering tonight. And so this is your perspective, and we think these questions cover a lot of ground in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with these Pints and Perspective sessions. The first question is, what is a crossroad? What is a crossroad that you believe Longmont is at? There could be a lot of things that are going on. What's some things that are kind of converging and we need to make decisions on in terms of how we move forward? We would love to hear your perspective on what a crossroad is that you think is a crossroad. And by the way, you are free to raise your hand at any time. You are free to raise your hand at any time. And given the number of people here, we may end up doing some small group discussion. Each of you are at a table. We may end up doing some small group discussion. We'll see how the evening goes with that. The second question is, what gifts has Longmont given you? This isn't a question we ask a lot. Typically we think of, what's wrong with Longmont? Why do we need to be afraid in Longmont? What are the deficiencies of Longmont? we see Longmont sometimes as a problem to be solved and not a possibility. And so we're going to change the nature of that conversation from it's a problem with all these deficiencies to what's good about it. And so that question kind of revolves around that. What gifts have you received, or a gift you've received from Longmont? Maybe the most important question on this board tonight is, what are you willing to do to help create a better future in Longmont? What are you willing to do? We can talk about that too. And so if you get inspired, maybe after a few weeks, and you say, I want to do something that I think can make a difference in Longmont, we'll be able to help you with that if you want that. So those are the three questions. Stew on those, kind of think about them in terms of a crossroad, a gift, or what you're willing to do to help make Longmont a better place. Do we have the, okay. All right, here's a question. Are you in the right room? How do you know if you're in the right room? And so we have some thoughts about that in terms of, are you in the right room tonight? You're probably wondering that yourself. So, and by the way, you being in the right room has a lot to do with your own personal responsibility in terms of making it the right room. And so that's a big part of this. So, right room, your voice counts. You're going to hear this again. Your thoughts matter. Your perspective is important. Your humanness is valued. That means you're in the right room. We didn't know what to call the other room, so we just called it the other room. And so your potential is silenced. You are more anxious about your uncertainty. All of us walk into this room not knowing who's going to be here, not certain about anything in terms of what's going to happen. And so what's this going to look like for you? And so we don't want you to be anxious about your uncertainty. We want you to say, hey, we all have uncertainty. In fact, sometimes we have to feast on uncertainty. But you don't necessarily need to be anxious about it. I think maybe as a society, and maybe things we need to be teaching our children a little bit more, is uncertainty is a big part of our lives. It just is. And given the pace of change and the complexity of everything, uncertainty is going to get greater and greater. And so us being anxious about it doesn't really help. And so, but if you're in a room where you don't necessarily feel that anxiousness, that's a better feeling. So anyway, next slide. Are you in the right room again? Right room discussions about, hey, here's what's good. Here's the goodness that we can talk about. Here are the ideals that we have. Here's purpose that we can really kind of frame our conversations around. And then we want to create a new future. We want to create a future that has the qualities of aliveness and being that we all want to live into and we all want to inhabit. That's what we believe. That's what Carol and I and a few others related to SOSSAS believe, that we can create that future. But we're not going to be able to create that future with the current model that currently exists. We can't create that future with saying that just a few people are responsible, that everybody has to be responsible. And if there's one message here that we want people to receive over these 8 weeks, is that we are all personally responsible for what's going on in Longmont, the reality that exists, and for the future of Longmont. The other room is there's discussions about other people who aren't in the room, or gossip, deficiencies, flaws. Let's talk about what's not working well. Let's talk about what we need to be afraid of. Let's talk about the problems that other people have. Or drama. Drama, how about that? That's one that kind of just gets in the way and eats up our energy. So we know we're not in the right room, but by the way, you all have the power to change the other people conversation, the gossip conversation, the deficiencies and flaws and drama into what's good, ideals, purpose, and creating a new future. Each of us have that power to do that. And by the way, when you bring that kind of strength, you're changing the room, and you're going to change the nature of the conversation. Are you in the right room? Excuse me. Attributes of the energy. Everybody's welcomed, strangers especially. You know, I lived in an era when Carol said I was the public safety chief, police and fire. We had this program called Stranger Danger. How many of you remember that? How many of you remember that? Of course. And I think that was a mistake. I get why we were trying to do that in terms of protecting our youth. But we need to figure out how to welcome strangers and how to make them feel like they're no longer a stranger. Dreams are held sacred. Presence is held by others. Progress is celebrated. and your spirit expands. The other room is cliques are obvious. I don't sense any cliques. I think a lot of people came in here singularly, a few couples, a few friends found each other, no cliques. Your presence has to be earned. Whoever you are, whatever your presence is, you have to kind of show that you deserve to be recognized. And your spirit says, I'm not valued. So there's another reason why we might be in the other room. The other reason why that we're in the right room is because we are drinking left-hand beer. Okay? We're drinking left-hand beer. That's not on the slide, by the way. And so, hey, before we go any further, a toast to left-hand beer. Thank you. Thank you all, Eric, Jake, and the Left Hand for making this happen. And by the way, every other Thursday night, we're going to do a toast. And if someone has a reason or purpose for why you think we need to toast, let us know. Okay, next slide. All right. Guidelines for enriching conversations. Again, some of these subjects are going to be a little bit controversial, a little bit maybe, hey, there's no really right or wrong answer. There's a lot of points along the continuum that can be made. And so how do we create guidelines? Now, these are SOSSAS' guidelines. Come on in. You're welcome. We'll find a chair. Carol's going to pass out a sheet that you can refer to. And so when you come to these conversations on every other Thursday night, these are going to be the guidelines for the nature of the conversation. We think in terms of future possibilities rather than the current or past problems. By the way, you know, we can solve problems, and we need to solve problems. There's no question about that. And I don't want to minimize the solving of problems too much. I just think we spend way too much time on that, and I think we need to have more conversations around possibilities. And keep in mind that when we're solving problems, we're really only fixing the past. That's all we're doing is fixing the past. And so the idea here is, how do we create a future that doesn't exist yet? How do we create new possibilities? So speak in that mindset. We each work to unify and harmonize our comments with those spoken by others. This is kind of makes common sense. This works. And so when someone says something that makes sense to you, but you have more to say hey, I'd like to build on that person's comment. I'd like to say a little bit more because here's my thinking about this. So there's a sense of harmony as you talk about that. That we talk in the context of applied spectrums, continuums, and nuances, rather than right or wrong, good or bad, conservative or liberal, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever that might look like. We're so caught up in these either-or discussions right now. We're so caught up in what's happening in terms of the politics, the economics, and we either have this solution or that solution. We have to think in terms of nuances, in terms of subtleties, in terms of spectrums and continuums. That's the new way of thinking, folks, that these things all exist, that these nuances are alive and well for all of us. And the more we get to understand those, the better the conversation is. So the either-or conversation is binary. It's kind of a zero-sum game. There's a loser and there's a winner. That doesn't have to be the case, folks. So that's one part of the nature of our conversations. We start off our conversations by acknowledging the gifts of others. I really liked what that person said. What that person said resonated with me. What that person just did 5 minutes ago was powerful for me. And so it's kind of recognizing the gifts. That's the nature of a conversation we're going to have. Next slide. And Carol's going to talk about this one.
Yeah, so I asked if I could introduce you to coming up with new ideas. And I think often when a new idea hits your mind, your brain, people go, well, I'm not sure if it'll work, or I'm not sure if it's perfect, or I'm not sure if I can state that. Well, we're going to encourage you to say, go for it. Just put it out there. Because until we put some new ideas out there, we can't create a future that's different than the present. This goes into design thinking. It's happening all over the academic world. We're not going to break things down and figure out what the problems are. We're going to build things up. We're going to try something. It may not be perfect at first. We have to figure it out together. And a lot of times that happens in teams. It happens by collaborating with others. I can give you so much data of what happens when our brains, in fact, right now, there's synapse going on between all of us. Our brains are working together to say, wow, you know, Longmont could do this. Longmont could be this. Longmont can. And I encourage you to let yourself go there. We also want to talk about and gracefully put that new idea out there. Yeah, it's yours. You're going to feel like you own it. And somebody might have a little bit of, oh, well, have you thought about this? That's okay. Don't take it personally. Just let the idea happen. We'll be doing that all through these 8 sessions. Then we like to frame comments, and we teach this in terms of questions rather than statements. Like, have you thought about? Or what if? What if we could make, here, I'm going to throw one out. What if we could make Main Street a pedestrian mall? What if? And now, all of you had a reaction, right? It might have been a positive. It might have been a negative. It might have triggered something really big in you. And that gets us to the third one. If something is said that triggers you, now, can somebody tell me what happens to your body physically when you get triggered? You freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze, right? Your heart rate might go up. You might feel internal temperature go up. And I'm just going to say, from an emotional intelligence, just be okay with that. Feel that. Name it. And then let it dissolve. That's what we're missing in society. We just can't be together because, oh, something's going to happen. So also, talk to the person who made that comment and just say, you know, I need to understand where you're coming from. I want to make sure I'm clear about what you just said. All right? So that there's clear mutual understanding. We are much more agreeable together. We are not so far apart. Every time I tell people about the School of Statesmanship, they go, oh, we need this. They never say, I need it. Right? So think about new ideas. Be willing to express the new ideas. You're not going to get attacked. You're safe in here. And do you have a question?
I have a logistics question.
Okay.
Can people point out where the free chairs are in here?
There's 2 up here.
Yep, I just sent 2 people out to the covered patio to come around and sit up front.
Okay.
One up there.
Do we want to try opening up the garage just to get a little more air in here too? Right here. Yeah, you get a front row seat. We saved it for you. It was? Okay. Okay. Are you all comfortable? All right. Okay. All right. I'm turning it back to Mike.
Okay, more guidelines. We speak with the motivation that we want to contribute to the good of the whole and not just our self-interest. We could stay stuck in the arrogance of our rightness. We can stay stuck with that. Or we can speak to what's the good of the whole, what moves beyond my self-interest. And so we ask people to think about what the good of the whole is. Again, this goes back to that idea that there's continuums and there's spectrums and there's nuances. Those are all part of the whole, not just our idea, not just a little box that we're living in. We participate from a place of personal accountability. We teach a class on the nature of how to have powerful conversations. And one of the things we talk about is ownership. That's ownership for the reality that exists now, and that's ownership for the reality we want to create. And so we ask that each of you don't speak for somebody else. Speak for what you think you're personally responsible for. That's a great guideline for a conversation. We're personally responsible for creating a future. That sounds like a tall order, but each of us are. And so I had many, many examples of people when Dan Benavides and I were doing our walks, we would ask people what their gifts are, what they could contribute. And we got anywhere from, I'm willing to house someone who doesn't have a house, to, well, if you ever have an event, I'm willing to make cupcakes. And everything in between, by the way. And so, but we just have to ask. And so another part of these conversations are the gift conversation. What gifts do you have that you can offer others? We move beyond blaming leaders or institutions. How many of us, and there's a number of us in this room, by the way, who have been in leadership positions. And so we want to blame leaders. And I can tell you, working for the cops, it was an easy institution to blame. And so we get that. We get that. We're an anomaly in a society where individual rights are absolutely paramount. And so that anomalous nature for police was part of what we had to work with. And so oftentimes we would hear, I'm blaming a leader. I'm blaming that person. I'm blaming the institution. And in the very same breath, people declared their own innocence and said, I'm not responsible for anything. How many conversations have we had along those lines in which that's the case? We have some people in this room who are counsel, former counsel, and wannabe counsel people. And so we have the continuum of that. And so my strong recommendation to anybody, and when I get the chance to do this, to our council, is set up something where you can begin to ask the questions. Where you can ask the questions, maybe on those Saturday morning coffees where you say, I'm not just going to sit here and get told that I'm to blame or the council's to blame for anything. Let's have a conversation where we talk about who's personally responsible for all the issues that we're confronting. So that is a great conversation guideline. We come from a place in which our relationships, the relationships we have, the connections we have, are as important as any one individual, if not more important. This is about the good of the whole. This isn't necessarily about any one person. I know we're founded on that rugged individualism in this country and in the West, and that sense of independence. We have a Declaration of Independence. And so we're not necessarily making the case that we need to have a declaration of interdependence, but boy, wouldn't that be powerful? Wouldn't that be powerful for us, and wouldn't that be powerful for this planet? In terms of we're all responsible for the welfare of this planet, we're all responsible for the welfare of our neighborhood, we're all responsible for the welfare of our community. And if we spoke that way, and we were that way, and our internal temperament was along those lines, we'd have different conversations. So we're going to continue on with one more slide with this, but this is where we want to go with the conversations. And so you have a sheet in front of you that you can look at and kind of go from there. But keep that in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, it's okay. Also, I'm an optimist, and I love everything positive, but it's okay to have your doubts. It's okay to express them. It's okay to say, no, I have great reservations. Because where else do you get, where do you get to talk about it with other people? All right? It's okay. And we can disagree. We just have to do it with good civil behavior. Okay? Everybody in agreement? We can do that. All right, great. Move it on.
I just want to add one more thing to that. There's another conversation that we encourage people to have in terms of gaining more commitment, accountability, and action from everybody in the community. And that is the conversation of dissent, where people have the safety and freedom to say, I have doubts, I have reservations, or I want to say no. And if I can't say no, your yes really doesn't mean a lot, does it? And so people have to be able to do that. And so that's one of those conversations. And so lip service is not the best conversation to have. People just not making any commitments or not taking ownership, not talking in terms of possibilities. But this conversation guideline is very, very important. We also teach how if someone does say no or express reservations, that's typically the first segment or the first part of being able to get to a yes. And so anyway, we talk a lot about that in terms of what that looks like. Okay. All right. From the last little subject we're going to work on is from the current to the future conversations. We all know, and I don't need to tell you this, and I'm not sure this is always altogether true all the time. I know that we watch our favorite news station, on TV. We kind of hang out with certain social networks. And a lot of those entities typically dramatize the human condition. They like to market fear, like to market fault. They like to exploit our wounds. They like to exploit a person's wounds or a community's wounds sometimes. They like to assign blame. A lot of the conversations, start listening to those and just hear what I just said, and you're going to see that happens a lot. Breaking news, alert. All these things are kind of in the form of drama. Let's keep the drama alive and well. So the current conversations drive us apart. And they're typically void on accountability and kind of soft on commitment. We don't have a lot of people saying, I'm going to be accountable for something. I'm going to be personally responsible for something. I'm not just talking to kind of pass time or to kind of sound good. I want to be accountable for something. Bringing change to Longmont is less about what or who is wrong, by the way. So anytime we want to bring change, if we're talking about what we need to be afraid of, what's wrong, what the problem is, what the deficiencies are, we're not going to make any forward progress. Fighting, being right, and proving a point creates more division, keeps us entangled in the same energy that we're trying to change. So if that's where you want to go, you're going to be entangled in that energy. You're not necessarily going to be able to move forward. We can't create a better Longmont by seeing through the lens of its deficiencies. We just can't. I'm not saying we don't solve problems. Again, we're solving the past when we solve problems. We're talking about possibilities. And so if we're going to hang out with deficiencies, if we're going to hang out with Longmont's a problem to be solved, we're not going to move forward. We tend to declare war on lots of things. War on drugs, poverty, social issues, crime. What's next, Carol? So, and we've declared war on many social issues in this country. And all of them, we've kind of lost at it in terms of what we're doing. And we hear words like war, battle, fight. When you hear those words, know that there's a path there that isn't going to be real healthy for you in terms of creating a future. Sometimes in our mind, we declare war on our neighbors or war on those people who disagree with us. And so if that's part of what we do, we have to think about that. We don't need to declare war. This just results in more conflict. Real influence isn't about convincing others their perspective is wrong, by the way, okay? But that we end up getting caught up in these conversations where what we're trying to do is convince others that they're wrong and we're right. Again, the arrogance of our rightness. And so being here, sharing our perspectives, this is what this is about. If you want the world to change, and I think this is coming up, you got to change yourself. Being here, sharing our perspectives, it's about embodying what we want to see and who we want to become. Be the change you want to see. A smart man once said that. I think his name was Mahatma Gandhi. You know, be the change you want to see in the world. If we want a stronger neighborhood, be a better neighbor. We want more compassion, be more compassionate. Welcome, folks. There's a chair. I don't know if we can... You mind sitting on his lap? There's a chair right here. Okay. All right. Welcome. If we want more compassion, be more compassionate. We want less conflict and divisiveness, be the harmonizer. We teach a class on harmonizing the contrast. So if there's 15 people in a room and you're kind of the facilitator, how do you expand that conversation in a way where you can get everybody to kind of agree on what the idea might be or what the solution might be or what the possibility might be that everyone can buy into so that they know their voice counts, their thoughts matter, and their humanness is valued. That's important. Those are skill sets that we're going to need, folks, because this world's getting more complex. The pace of change is getting faster. There's more dots to connect than there have ever been, and we're going to need to be able to do that. And AI can help us a little bit with that. But the human relationship aspect is going to have to happen. And we're making a case in our School of Statesmanship that this is the way it has to happen. If we want more connection, be the connector. Be the change we want to see in the world. Longmont will shift, folks, because you did, because I did, because we did. That's when Longmont shifts. Not because we were able to prove a point. Not because we argued louder. Not because we lived more years. Or we have more officially sanctioned power, or because our mic makes us right. these are all wasteful and weakening to us. Okay, that's not where the influence, that's not where the power, that's not where the change happens. Attacking others, which we see a lot of, doesn't make us more enlightened. It just doesn't, folks. Living up to our potential or our own personal or true mastery isn't about proving anything, being right or being more intellectual or being in any one political party. You don't find true mastery in those things. You don't find living up to your potential or personal mastery in those kinds of ways of being. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about embodying. We're talking about being the change we want to see. We're giving this very quickly to you all tonight. And we talk a lot more about that in our classes, but we just want you to know that's where we're coming from. And that's what we believe as we work through this evening's conversation and the rest of the conversations, and as we meet the candidates and hopefully influence some candidates to think this way, that this is the way we have to go eventually. It's about being what we want the world to look like. No force, no intimidation, no applause necessary. Okay? We waste considerable energy focused on problems, arguing, proving, and dissecting what's deficient, proving who's wrong, and focusing on what we're afraid of. We want to call this passion. And some people say, I'm just a passionate person. But we end up basically just exhausting ourselves because this comes out of the ego aspect of who we are. And the more we can kind of separate ourselves in our own internal temperament from that ego aspect of ours, the more energy we're going to have. So if we're focused on problems, we're going to have more problems, folks. And we're going to have more proof that things are broken. When we focus on possibilities, we're more likely to create a better future. Okay, with that, we're going to end the SOSSAS part of this discussion, and I'm going to turn it back over to Carol, who's going to introduce, and I don't know if we have any specific order. If anybody wants to go first, I'm just looking at you. Brandon, why don't you go first? All right, Brandon Schaefer's first, and Carol's going to talk a little bit about their bio.
I'm going to read this because, these are two men that have had mastery in their lives, as you think about that. People who served our community. So Brandon joined the St. Vrain Valley School District in September of 2015. He has a multifaceted position involving legal and policy analysis, business development. He's been quite instrumental in the pathways to technology, the early college high schools. He works directly with teachers and administrators to support educational achievement in the district. And we heard Don Haddad today. We'll have him at one of our sessions also, where these kids are being able to, Brandon can talk about it. Our youth are being able to graduate from high school and graduate with an associate's degree and specialize in high-paying jobs right here in St. Vrain Valley. So that's a big part of a good community. Before joining St. Vrain, Brandon was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper to be the chairperson of the Colorado Parole Board, where he served on the parole board for 2.5 years as a dedicated public servant. He also is a former Colorado State Senator. How many know him as a senator? I remember when I moved to Longmont, he wasn't just a senator. He was first elected in 2004. He represented Senate District 17 for Longmont, Erie, Lafayette, and Louisville. But he was selected by his peers to serve as president of the Senate from 2009 to 2012. He also served as the Senate Majority Leader, Senate Assistant Majority Leader, and the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman. We were talking today about what it's like to go to Denver and work in the State House now. And I asked him, would you do it again? But just know that this experience is in the room. He's a graduate of, what are those universities in California? The big one, Stanford. Smart guy. And CU Law School. He served in active duty in the U.S. Navy from 93 to 97 and has been a licensed attorney in Colorado since 2001. Brandon, you're up on the chair, and we're excited you're here. Thank you for everything you've done.
So now I guess, we're still working out the format, so I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. But thank you all for being here. Let me mention, one of my favorite things to do when I was in the state Senate was town hall meetings. I loved this format. I still love this format because I'm not a very good public speaker, is the truth of the matter. So what I really enjoy doing is engaging people in conversation. That's what I'm good at. So what I'm hoping we're able to get to as we move forward. I see Eric back there. Okay, help Mike. There's a chair over there, yes. What I'm hoping we get to as we move forward in this evening is just an open dialogue with a group of people. What an amazing turnout. When I was thinking of what to discuss as we kind of open and give some opening remarks to kick this off, I looked at the board and I wanted to talk a little bit about number 2. What gift has Longmont given to you? And the way I'm going to do that is by just telling a story, right? I mean, that's kind of how I get into things. My bio, you heard that I served in the Navy. I was actually stationed on a ship in Yokosuka, Japan. So USS Hewitt, our home port was Yokosuka. Lived in Japan for three plus years. It's where I met my wife. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, you have a Japanese wife. No, not quite. My wife is actually from Pennsylvania. She's from outside of Philadelphia, and she was a third grade teacher at the elementary school on the naval base. We got set up on a blind date. We started dating over there. And then all of our mutual friends were over there, so we decided to get married in Japan, and quite an experience, quite a story in and of itself. But then we moved back to Colorado. I'm originally from Denver. Grew up born and raised in Denver before going off to college and the Navy. Anyway, we moved back here. I went to law school at CU and graduated in 2001. And 2001 was really an eventful year because that's also the year that we started a family. My dad died, and we bought our first house and graduated from law school, got my first job. All those types of things happened in 2001. And I remember after graduating, we were looking for our first home. My wife was pregnant to start our family, and we were living in an apartment down in Boulder. And so where do you go, right? You get a realtor, you start looking in Boulder, and you realize very quickly, I can't afford that. That's not going to happen, right? This is 2001. Imagine that what it's like today, right? So then we went out to Louisville and Lafayette, and we were looking at houses out there. We're like, just nothing that we could afford starting out. Looked in Erie a little bit, didn't really like what we saw. Went out to Firestone early on, didn't really like. And then we, as a social event, we came up here to Longmont, and we went to a picnic in Thompson Park. And I remember looking at Jessica. I'm using you as a prop. I'm sorry. Looking at Jessica, I said, this is kind of, yeah, right. This is kind of cool. It reminds me of where I grew up in Park Hill down in Denver. The house, the architecture, everything. This is kind of a cool little fun place. She was like, yeah, I guess, All right, well, let's start looking. And sure enough, we found a really nice little house. It's over in the Longmont Estates neighborhood, northwestern Longmont, and we ended up buying the house, right? Well, when we moved in, I got all my law school buddies to help me move all the furniture up here, and it was a big deal because, as I mentioned, my father had recently passed away at that time as well, and he lived by himself in a condo in Aurora. So we ended up moving all of his stuff, which now became my stuff, up to my house. So we're making runs back and forth from Aurora up to Longmont, in the moving van. Me and my buddies, moving all this stuff. It was a long, long day. It was at the beginning of the summer, so shortly after law school was over, all that stuff. And I remember the evening set in, all the friends leave, they go home, and it's just Jessica and I. And our doors and windows had been opened all day. And we had a big light in the entranceway, and the light from the front porch was there. And we shut the door, and all the moths, all the miller moths, it was that time of year, came out of the lights. And they swarmed all around her. And she just broke down in tears. She just started crying, and she looked at me, and she's like, how the hell did we get to Longmont, Colorado? Where the hell am I, right? She had no idea. And it was like, she's from Philadelphia, and she's like, what am I doing here, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope this works out, you know? Fast forward 5 years, right? Fast forward 5 years. We are driving home from Denver, where my mom and stepfather lived. We went down for one of the holidays. We're on the diagonal highway, just about to make that pin turn to Airport Road, right? And we're in our red Subaru Outback, right? Like a good Coloradan. Both of the kids in the car seats in the back. And as we're making the turn to come home, she says to me, Brandon, I'm so happy we're going home. There's no place in the world I'd rather live than Longmont. There's no place in the world I would rather raise my family than Longmont, right? That's the gift, right? When it comes full circle and you understand the sense of place that is here, you know, what's available, whether it's high quality schools, whether it's safe streets and communities, whether it's, you know, neighbors and friends that you can create in your local neighborhood, right? The restaurants are great, the breweries are great, right? There's so much that is offered in this community. Longmont Baseball League, LBL, raised my child, right? Airborne Gymnastics, raised my daughter. All these places, they're just wonderful. That's what Longmont has given me, is a place to raise my family. And I wouldn't have chosen anywhere else in the world to do it than right here. So that's my setup. And now I've got to hand it over to Tim. Yeah? Okay.
I'm going to introduce Tim. That's a beautiful story. Beautiful. And you have to stay up here. Well, we'll put all three chairs up here. Okay. Okay. So many of you may know Tim Waters. He's a former member of the Longmont City Council. He represented Ward 1. He transitioned from his role as a city council member to a full-time volunteer. And I can say he worked with us on SOSSAS as we were developing curriculum and putting together classes. He was so helpful. He has this background in education. He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. I'll just say that from the first moment that he sat at my kitchen table and I got to know him. In December of 2023, Tim was a career educator. He spent over 44 years in the field. He split between 23 years as a practitioner. He calls it a practitioner. You know, he went from teacher, I think you did everything, including superintendent in the Greeley schools. And then 21 years running an education research and development corporation. Tim's volunteer activities include his membership in Longmont Rotary, a member of the Rotary Club Board of Directors. He's on the board of directors for Longmont Community Justice. He's a member of Longs Peak and Broomfield Hospital advisory boards. He's chair of Longmont Public Media. And I don't know if I said thank you to Longmont Public Media, but you know, I call up Sergio. They are here recording. So we'll have this on record. We'll be able to kind of transcribe it. We hope to get it on YouTube so people can actually see this as well. And he's co-chair of the Learning Center. And for all of you that are watching what's happening at the Learning Center, it's an amazing organization for their capital campaign. He's also deeply involved in the Early Childhood Alliance, which is dedicated to funding childcare. And I know there's some young couples in here. I'm a new grandma. I can tell you childcare is the issue of the day for working families. A lot of people know that as public good. Tim, come on up.
Thanks, Carol. I'm going to set my pint down right there. When I walked in, I asked, should I bring my water bottle, or are we serious about pints and perspectives? They said, get that water bottle out of here and go get yourself a beer. So, to Mike and to Carol, thanks for what it takes to help get these organized. Eric, thanks as well for opening your tasting room. I know this is a special place, and this is the beginning of a series of special conversations. Not unique, but unusual in this or any community. So you heard my background. I'm going to just prop myself up here. I'm going to try to honor everything that Mike said about staying focused on the goodness and the assets of the community. But I'm going to probably put one step into that other room just for a minute and try to pull some worst fears that I'm going to share back into some best hopes in the room number one. So if anybody ever listened to how many listened to city council meetings ever? Right, so in one or two of those city council meetings, we would, well, every Tuesday night, we would hear the worst fears that people would bring about whatever the issue was. We'd hear it from the public, oftentimes we'd hear it from the staff. And I found myself every once in a while wondering, aren't there some best hopes here? If we're going to craft policy, in my opinion, the worst case or the worst fear drives bad policy. So every once in a while, could we just acknowledge all the worst fears we've heard about on a Tuesday night, or that you may have walked in the room with tonight, need to be acknowledged, because we can create them. But we don't have to settle for them, and they don't have to drive our decision making. In the early days of the pandemic, I was not on the Longmont Public Media Board, but I was a volunteer. And only weeks after Longmont Public Media was awarded the contract to be the city's provider of public access television, the world stopped. They were awarded a contract in late June, and on March 16th, I think I have the date right, everything stopped because of the pandemic. And so many things that they had proposed to do the city, and I was on the council that helped approve that scope of work, they couldn't do because the events they were going to stream just didn't happen. So I was one of the folks in a room one day when the question went out, anybody have an idea about content we could actually create? And from that day to this, I have been a content creator for Longmont Public Media, meaning that I create really interesting stuff that nobody watches. Right? Every once in a while, my wife will attend something that I've done and go, God, that was pretty good. But if you go back and look at how many watch something, not very many. But here's where I mention this. What I proposed at that time, in the early days of the pandemic, we were several months in, I said, I have an idea. I'd kind of like to learn more about what's in the hearts and minds of Longmonters as we're going through an unprecedented moment in the history of mankind. Right? There was the Black Plague, and there have been the Spanish flu, but never globally simultaneously were we all confronted with a set of circumstances that nobody was prepared for. So I was just curious, what were you thinking about at the time? So I interviewed, I think, 72 Longmonters and I think 69 interviews. They're all a matter of public record if anybody's interested. But I asked 3 questions in those interviews. First of all, how are you getting yourself through this time? Second question was, what are you doing to keep yourself connected to friends and family? The third question was, really similar to the first question up here. What's your best hope for a post-pandemic world? Understanding we're going to come out of this. And when we come out of it, it's going to be different. And that world is one we have a chance to create together. What are you willing to do to help create that? I had no idea when I asked that question how inspired I would become by the answers. If you were to just queue up those interviews and listen to the response to that last question, you would be as inspired as I was, and I still am. The problem with that is what I see happening in the world too much today is not a reflection of those best hopes. It's a reflection of the worst fears people bring into rooms like this and into other rooms we find ourselves in as members of the community. I want to reiterate what Mike said. He said it a couple times. Longmont is not a problem to solve or a series of problems to solve. But Longmont's not perfect either. We need to confront the realities of the world in which we live, and in my opinion, take the moment or a few moments to consider what's our best hope and what are the strategies that would get us there. Because I promise you, if you think about what it takes to get from where we are to the best hope, your strategies will be quite different than if you identify your worst fears and what you're going to do to avoid them. You go in very different directions. And too often, being driven by the worst fear and those strategies create the very worst outcome you're trying to avoid. So for me, going back to some of what you heard Carol frame as a way to get into these conversations, like what if? Here's where I'm going to take a step into the other room. And I'll try to do this fast, Mike, because I know you want me to sit down. Here's the step into the other room. What if? And I'm saying taking politics out of this. I don't care what your political stripes are, the ideologies are. Just some what ifs. What if we have a lot of folks in Longmont who lose their health insurance? What if we have folks, we have many people in Longmont dependent on housing and urban development funding for housing vouchers? What if that funding goes away and the support that people need, many of them seniors, to stay housed is no longer available? What if those members of our community today who are terrified by what might happen, think about those who are in the country undocumented, and whatever you think about what they deserve, their children do not deserve to be abandoned and left alone. What if we have children in Longmont who find themselves coming home from school with their parents being taken and detained somewhere else? What if, Carol mentioned child care, Longmont or Boulder County isn't quite a child care desert, but I would tell you we have access today to accommodate about 18% of the infants and newborns to be placed in, for those parents who would like them placed in licensed child care, less than 1 in 5 have a place for them. And if you can find the place, do you know what it costs for care for an infant today is $23,000 on average in Boulder County. For a toddler, it's $21,000. For a pre-K child, it's $16,000. Got 2 of those? It's the equivalent of paying them to go off to an Ivy League school, right? That's the reality, right? What if the funding for Head Start, which is absolutely essential for the parents and the children who need it most, what if that goes away? And it's zeroed out in the president's budget. Today we have 750 plus children on a waiting list in Boulder County who qualify for subsidies for childcare of the parents. 18 months ago there were 0 children on a waiting list. Today there's 750. The only thing that's changed, not the families and not their needs, it's the funding available to support them, right? So I could go on and on, veterans benefits and whatnot. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm saying, and I don't want to be a fearmonger, and I don't want to be driven by my worst fears, but the what ifs are possible. For me, in this question, one of the best parts about Longmont, as far as I'm concerned, one of our greatest assets is our connectedness. Look in the room tonight. How many people would show up in any other community with how little advertising there was to be part of a conversation like this? So how engaged Longmonters are together. The willingness of people to lean in together to solve problems. I don't know if there are other communities anywhere quite like this. If there was a way to calculate the value of donated time, of volunteer time in this city, it would be astronomical in the billions of dollars. That's the goodwill and the motivation and the aspiration of the people in this room and the people who are your friends and neighbors. So right now I'm in the middle of reading the book Abundance. Anybody else reading Abundance right now? Yeah. And one of the points that the authors make, they offer some ideas about how to move into the future. But two of the ideas the authors offer, and then I'll be quiet. One is how important is it to be focused together on the outcomes we want for our communities. And to those who are candidates for public service, city council members, I would encourage you to think deeply about the difference between process and outcomes. You have to have both, but we get so focused on process in this town, it just stops us from making decisions that result in outcomes. So hopefully we can elevate, as we're elevating discourse, we're going to elevate discourse, amplify the good news, and deepen understanding. That's what these conversations are going to do. I hope our elected leaders can get as focused on outcomes and staff, and I know there's some former staff here, as on process, number one. Here's the second thing that they reminded me of as I read the book. You all know the name Tom Friedman. Tom writes a lot of things. He writes for the New Yorker, and he's written a number of books. About 16 or 17 years ago, he and Mike Mandelbaum published a book called That Used to Be Us. And it was their account of all of the incredible things we've done as a country in comparison to the rest of the world. And then looking around at the time they were writing the book at what was happening in this country compared to the rest of the world. With the question, why can't we do that? Why does it take decades to try to get a high-speed rail underway in California, which is not underway, in the time that in China, tens of thousands of miles of high-speed rail was completed? How is it you could have airports completed around the world, beautiful airports, when we can't fix escalators in hours, right? Their question was, pointing to those other places, that used to be us. What's gotten in the way of what is going on in this country? Their answer was, reiterated in the book Abundance, was the ability to take collective action, to be in rooms like this together, to look at opportunities, possibilities, and decide we can all contribute, but we've got to lean into it together with all the noise that might go along with that. We've got to figure out how to take collective action. So if I go back to my what-if statements, I'm president of the Longmont Community Justice Partnership Board of Directors, and I am going to advocate with that board for that group that is committed to acknowledging when there's harm and who's harmed, to bring together those responsible to restore faith in one another and faith in this community, and work together on the solutions that work for all of us moving forward. So anybody here who's interested in working on any of the things I've mentioned, I'd love to visit with you after this meeting, because I'm serious about trying to bring people together to take collective action in response to the what-ifs, both the good ones and the challenging ones as we move forward. Thanks for the opportunity.
Grab your beer, buddy. Okay. Thank you. You know, one of the things that get settled here. One of the things I want to go back to is, I know what we talked about a lot from SOSSAS sound maybe a little bit pie in the sky, maybe a little bit too idealistic, but I can tell you, working 26 years as everything cool? Working 26 years as a police and fire chief in this community, I knew more than anybody else in this community what didn't go well. I knew about the child molestations. I knew about the sex assaults. I knew about robberies. I knew about anything that didn't go well more than anybody else. And I knew our officers and our fire staff knew a lot of things as well. And these are not the theories, but these are the practices that we put in place. We wanted our officers to see people as a possibility. Tim mentioned restorative justice, restorative principles, practice, and justice. We put that in place back in the mid-1990s because we began to see, we wanted our officers to see people as a possibility, not just a problem to be solved. We were able to develop a number of alternatives to the criminal justice system beyond arresting people and beyond summonsing people that worked much more effectively. And the proof, I guess, is kind of in the data in terms of what happened with the lessening of gang issues in this community, the lessening of crime in this community, the lessening of serious or lethal domestic violence in this community. At one point, we did declare domestic violence as the #1 public safety issue in this community. Only about 20% of them are reported. And that was like 700 or 800. And so you can begin to do the math, and then you can do the math in terms of how many children were involved, and you're going to see more people were hurt by domestic violence than any other set of circumstances in this community, including car accidents. We lessened that dramatically. It had everything to do with applying these practices that we just talked about. And so when you look at somebody as a possibility, you see somebody as having literally infinite capacity versus seeing someone as a problem to be solved, or versus seeing someone as error prone or weak or limited. Your actions, as Tim talked about, are going to be different. Your conversations are going to be different. And so that's what we're talking about here. And so if you can do it in a public safety department where people are often trained to figure out what's wrong with this picture, you can almost do it in any environment. And so I just want to make that case. The other thing I want to mention, and I mentioned this last week at our Rotary Club when we did the presentation on Pints and Perspectives, was the straw that broke the camel's back, and by the way, it doesn't involve anybody in this room, but there were two people in this community who are not going to go, their names are going to go unmentioned for the sake of their integrity, who went to war with each other, who battled each other, both of these people had big hearts. They were great minds, had done great things in this community, had served this community on a lot of different levels, and had camps, by the way, kind of their own groups of people who supported them. And they could not help but battle each other in terms of, and it was front page news a lot. And I just said to myself, and I said to Carol, we can be better than this. We don't have to go down this route. Here's two good people with big hearts, great minds, have done a lot of service in this community. And right now, they're because of what's going on, they're kind of breaking this community apart a little bit. And so that's what started this whole school of statesmanship, stewardship, and service. And that was the straw. The idea has been percolating in my mind for probably 40 years in terms of where I got the idea from and why I thought it was important. But that was the straw. And so we don't need to go down that road. And that's the road that a lot of people are on. And that's what we talked about in terms of how do you create conversations for the future where we can take what each of those people had to offer and become something where the whole is greater than the sum of those two parts. That's how we have to think. We have to think differently. And so it requires a different mindset. It requires a different temperament. And so that's the encouragement that we bring to you all tonight. And so I just want to make sure that you're pretty clear about that. So anyway, Tim, Brandon, and I are up here. But I want to know if you have any questions, comments, or anything that was said, first of all. And then we may break down into some small groups from your table, and we're going to do something else. So go ahead. You got a microphone back here. Here you go.
Is it on?
Testing.
Yes, it's on. Thank you.
I noticed you're recording this. Is this going to be posted somewhere, and where?
Go ahead, LPM.
It'll be on YouTube after we edit it. So, maybe a few days.
This is Eric from LPM. This is Phil from LPM. Sergio was here earlier. And I'm just going to echo and double down on what Carol said later. We'll get to your question. But LPM is a great asset in this community. Great asset in this community. So Eric, in a few days, this should be edited and out on YouTube. Under Longmont Public Media Channel. Okay. And what was important about that question for you? Why was that question important for you? Carol, would you give him the mic back? Thanks.
Because I really enjoyed a lot of the things you said, and I want to revisit it and reflect.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. Other questions about tonight's conversation so far?
This isn't a question, just a comment. I think it's important that we can pass this on to other people, and YouTube is a perfect vehicle for doing that.
Beautiful.
You know,
Thank you.
I have a list of people I'd really like to hear this.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that SOSSAS is involved in with one of the local Rotary clubs is bringing this to our schools, our local schools, by the way, in terms of what if they heard, here's a different way to kind of be versus what they're exposed to now in terms of what they're seeing, maybe in families, maybe neighborhoods, maybe the media, but there might be another way that we can be with each other in terms of of what that looks like. And so we have a big deal going in terms of being able to bring a lot of these ideas to our schools. Other questions, comments? Yes.
Mike, I was wondering, as you were developing.
Here's a mic. Here's a mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. You know what I meant to see? Take the mic. Carol has the mic right there.
Oh, that's right. I was just wondering, it's like, have you been using these processes in your public safety background?
Oh yeah. If I didn't articulate that well enough, this is what we did.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the excellence that our local public safety organizations have exhibited to Longmont. It's very unique.
Yeah. And this is what. There's a longer story here, but this is what because we did this internally, we wanted our staff to treat our community this way in terms of, and getting our community, especially certain neighborhoods in our community, to kind of respond more. And Tim wrote, right, is Ezra Klein the author of Abundance? Right. Co-authors. Yeah, co-author. What Ezra Klein and his co-author talked about in terms of that, one of the things we tried to convince our community was, and in any neighborhood is, you're enough. You have more than enough to do what you need to be able to do to make your neighborhood safe, to bring a little bit more wellness to it, to help educate your children, to take care of each other. And so that kind of self-sufficiency aspect was something that we did with every community, but we couldn't have done that with the idea that everything is deficient, or your neighborhood's a problem to be solved. Or here's what's wrong with you, or here's what you need to be afraid of. So yes, next question.
So my question is for Brandon and Tim.
Sure.
So you both have extensive experience working with local communities, working in the state, and so we all have seen a lot of change and growth that has happened in Longmont and even Colorado. I'm curious what you guys would say is some of the crossroads that both Longmont and Colorado are facing for the next 5 years, 10 years, and what you guys think will be the biggest things that we need to address.
Great question.
Well, budget's always an issue, right? Depending on, what happens, in the School Finance Act, we're always working very closely, looking very closely at the state budget process down at the Capitol for our schools. But when I was in the legislature, every year we would have, every year we had challenges. I was the Senate president through the Great Recession. So trying to come up with the billions of dollars to backfill the cuts and everything else was really difficult. And I'm afraid we're looking at similar scenarios down there, not because of a recession necessarily, but because of Tabor limits. And I think that there will be a reckoning. I think that the legislators are going to need to figure out how can you fund a first-rate system of higher education? How do you provide well-funded, well-maintained roads? How do you provide the services that the people of Colorado want and need, and do it within the budgetary restrictions that we currently have? That's going to be a statewide reckoning. I don't know that's necessarily a Longmont-specific issue, although things at that level tend to trickle down. The one thing I was really thinking, I've given some thought to that's Longmont specific, moving on to kind of growth issues. And housing, I know, is a big issue that people are concerned about in our community. It was a big issue when I first ran for office in 2004. It was the same type of high growth environment, and smart planning was an issue that we always had spoke with our constituents about. Something that occurs to me, and maybe you take it for granted because it's not obvious, or maybe it's not something you think about. I mean, when you drive from Boulder to Longmont along the diagonal highway, once you leave Boulder, you pretty much leave Boulder, right? And there aren't strip malls all along the diagonal highway, and there aren't, gas stations on the corner, a restaurant here, a bar there. You don't see that. Same thing when you are doing, driving north or, driving on 287, coming north from Erie, Louisville, Lafayette. You don't see a lot of development. There isn't a lot of development outside of Longmont. Once you get into the Longmont, boundaries, you see it. But up to that point, there's a lot of open space there. There's a lot of undeveloped property. And the fact of the matter is that's intentional, right? People thought that through. They put policies in place to preserve those open spaces with a philosophy that we wanted our towns to be towns and then the outlying areas to remain outlying areas. We wanted to prevent sprawl from seeping out into our farm, agricultural land outside of the urban areas, right, or the populated areas. I think that philosophy still helps us today. What I think is challenging when you talk to people inside of Longmont, we don't want more growth in Longmont. And one of the things I think they fail to realize is part of the bigger philosophy. If you want these areas to remain open, then you need to make sure that you have opportunities for people to find housing in the urban areas, in the populated areas. You can't say no here and no there. You have to have a plan for that growth because it's coming, right? We project in the next decade, our school district right now is 33,000 students. In 10 years, it'll be 75,000 students, right? It's coming. It's coming for all the reasons that I loved raising my family here. This is a wonderful place to live. We have the amenities, we have the views, we have we have the services. It's relatively affordable still, right? All of the things. People are coming here. We have to have a plan to accommodate that growth, and we can't just say no. So I think of that philosophically as a way to navigate through the logistics of actually how do you do that. I mean, there's some very detailed conversations that need to take place in that space, but have this philosophical understanding of what the growth plan was, what the planning was in Boulder County 20 years ago, 30 years ago, why we have grown the way that we have. Now let's stay within that original plan, I think makes sense.
So just building on what Brandon said, much of that growth that Brandon talked about is going to occur outside the city limits of Longmont. It's going to be in Weld County, the east part of the school district. But that doesn't mean Longmont's not going to continue to grow. I will just tell you, unless something's changed since I rotated off of council, and that's possible, but I don't think so in terms of this number. When Envision Longmont was created, you can like it or not, but it was the master plan for Longmont. The projected build-out was about 116,000 people. It grew to 125,000 people when some decisions were made about opportunities for smaller lot sizes and density. So the projected build-out's 120,000 people. So there's going to be growth in other parts of the school district. But we're going to reach the end of our growth in Longmont, and what is left to grow is going to be brownfield or redevelopment. There just isn't, because of the reasons Brandon enumerated, we're not going to have space to build out in Longmont. It's going to go up. Now, I was on city council long enough to hear, I don't know how many times, affordable housing is great, but not here, right? Well, it's an issue for some people. Well, there are infrastructure issues for sure, transportation and otherwise. Our water reserves are in good shape. Yeah, I hear concerns about, do we have enough water? Yeah, we'll have enough water for 125,000 people plus. That's not going to be your concern. There is a theory, and there are locations around the world where traffic issues are reduced as you create more opportunities for people to live close to where they work, right? And then we have to create ways for them to get there safely, not necessarily in an automobile. And I'm not making a case to not drive. I'm just saying that's all about planning. But the crossroads, we are at a crossroads now when it comes to growth, what that's going to look like, how much we're going to grow up, and what does smart development look like. I have a point of view on this, but I'll just keep it to myself for the moment. I will say there are a couple of others that we ought to be paying real close attention to right now. We all know that what was Sundance is coming to Boulder. I think it's 2027 is the year. That's going to be unbelievable opportunity for Longmont. What we ought not to do, I'm now thinking about potential elected officials in this room. We ought not to be asleep at the switch. We ought not to have a really clear vision about how do we optimize opportunity and what do we need to be doing today that would create educational, entertainment opportunities in Longmont for our children and for our adults. I am concerned that there's not enough, we're not amplifying that discussion enough to be clear-eyed about what we need to be doing today. What is required in terms of infrastructure and what kind of amenities would you want to create along with that infrastructure to take advantage of what may be the biggest opportunity in terms of both cultural and economic prosperity facing this community for a long time. And I'm a little concerned we don't have a vision for it right now. And the lack of a vision is going to keep us in a cul-de-sac while other communities take advantage.
I'm gonna thank both of you because you plugged in 2 weeks, June 12th, be back here. We're going to talk about gray and green environmentalism, which is some of that, what you just talked about, having the open space, having the boundaries, and having the infill. So that will happen in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for your comments, and thank you for the questions. We're going to get back to that. One other thing that I do want to kind of reiterate in terms of possibilities, when we said to neighborhoods that you're enough, the previous response was you're not enough. You need us in order to make you well, that you need the cops or that you need other government services. And I'm not saying that those aren't part of the mix, but that was more the message than you're enough. And one of the frontiers that I think need to be part of the vision that these two gentlemen have talked about, one of the frontiers we've yet to really kind of look into is the surfacing, the activating, and the coordinating of real substantive social capital. The gifts, the talents, the resources, the expertise, the skills of everyday people in this community. Again, we hear the comments, well, I'm going to blame the leader and I'm going to blame the institution, and in the same breath declare my innocence. It can no longer be a way that we do business. And I would encourage anybody who wants to be an elected official or is an elected official or has designed somewhere down the road of becoming an elected official is to consider that kind of galvanizing of the social capital in our mix. I can tell you it will have great impact on a number of social issues that confronts every single community in this country. If you were to ask any mayor or any police chief in this country, what are your 3 top social issues or health issues, more likely they're going to say addiction, chemical substances, mental health, and people who are unhoused. And sometimes those all swirl together, almost to the chief, because I've talked to almost all of them, and to mayors, that they're going to tell you, and those things can drain systems of their money. And so how do we galvanize, surface activate, and coordinate the social capital that's so much, you heard the word abundance a lot. I haven't read Abundance yet by Ezra Klein and his co-author, but I'm hoping that they touch on that social capital is mostly dormant right now. All right, more questions, more thoughts before we move into our next section of this. Yes, go ahead. Carol, we have a mic over here.
So I have a question about, you're talking about getting involved and being an elected official and all that. One of the major issues that we see in coordinated elections and our local elections is that nobody votes. So what do we do? So to the third question here, what are your opinions on how do we get our community to engage in our coordinated elections? How do we get people to actually flip and vote during our small local elections? Everybody votes. We have a 97% turnout. in our presidential elections, but how do we get the rest of everybody to actually engage during this November? I'm assuming everybody in this room who's actually here and engaging right now knows that we have an election this November, which we do, by the way, everybody, if you don't know. But like, we have one this November. We'll have one in June for a primary, next June. But nobody actually turns out to those ones. And so what do we do? How do we talk to our neighbors when you say the word election? They're like, it's a thing. And it's not. I don't care what you vote, just that you vote. And I can't talk to my neighbor about it. So how do I have those conversations? What do you guys think?
First of all, let me just answer your question. I wish I had a magic wand. I wish I knew the answer to your actual question is how do you get them to the polls. But let me give you a frame through which to maybe talk to your neighbors about how important this is, right? One of my favorite political quotes is, "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance." Let me say that again. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. It's attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but I don't think he actually said it. Doesn't really matter, because the quote is the quote. Every election cycle, doesn't matter what year it is, every election cycle, some politician or a candidate is going to get up in front of you and they will say, this is the most important election of our time. Right? Have you heard that? Right? Every election cycle, somebody gets up and says, but here's the thing. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So every election cycle is, in fact, the most important election of our time, because you sleep one time and you lose it, right? And I don't know how you create that frame and instill how important voting actually is to every individual. We can all point to that one election where somebody won by 1 or 2 votes, right? Yeah, there were 1 million votes cast, and 1 vote decided the outcome, right? If I could have gotten a different person would have been elected, that type of thing. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The founding members of our country, they knew how fragile it was, right? I don't, you don't. I think we're starting to see, right? But you gotta show up and defend your right to live in a democracy, and you do that by voting.
I don't know that I have anything to add to that. I wish I had a brilliant response. If I did, I would have been elected mayor.
You know, I'm.
And I don't have a brilliant response.
I know you asked them, but I'm going to say, make friends with your neighbors. Care for your neighbors. Treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated. Bring your neighborhood together. What? I'm on a roll. Organize your neighborhood. Don't let the political parties take over that part. Let's do it from the neighborhood part, because everybody in your neighborhood counts. You count for each other. You know, when I get a call or a text from my neighbor saying, "Oh, your garage door is open. You forgot to shut it again," I always text back and say, "Oh, thank you. You are such a good neighbor." And then you can have a conversation about, maybe somebody that you like, or maybe somebody that showed up here, or maybe somebody surfaces right here that never intended to do anything. They didn't have to work their way through a political system. Last summer, I tell this story. Last summer, we had classes called Active Citizenship. We met at the Innovation Center, and we worked in a small group format at tables. And I said, if I wanted to run for office, I wouldn't know how to do it. And one of the ladies says, well, first you have to go to the political party meetings. You have to show up. You have to serve. You have to help somebody. You have to serve your time.
She kept saying, you have to put in your time. And I thought, what a shame, because there could be somebody in this room that's bright and excited, and they want to, they want to get in there. They want to dig in. In fact, I know a certain somebody who took a class, this one, Diane Christ. She was one of our very first students in SOSSAS, and she was on the campaign trail. And guess what she did? She walked neighborhoods. She did something very similar to what Mike Butler did. And I will just tell you, she's a beautiful person. Yeah.
Another question.
Oh, it's fine. Yours is so much more important.
No, she had a question. She had a question, and this person, and did you have a question?
Just had a comment.
Oh, but if I run up there, they're good. The microphones are going to bounce. Okay. All right.
You go ahead.
Just a comment about the voting. Only half the people vote in the presidential, and in other countries, like this has been solved. It's compulsory because it's so freaking important.
I vote.
It is. Mike and I were just in Eastern Europe, and those are all fledgling democracies. Serbia, Croatia, they are all compulsory to vote.
So I have a question with, and if it's not the appropriate time, it's fine to say no, but it's how can you make it better here? Can we turn left in this town? You cannot turn left in this town. You have the light turns left and it lets two cars go through, and we need it just a little longer. But honestly, I am concerned about the AI stuff that they have just, because I have been victim of this 4 times. I drive down to Denver all the time, and I have to go to hospitals. When I'm in a rush, I get into, the toll road. I have been falsely accused 4 times of crossing the double line. They send you a $150 bill, and then they say you have to prove your innocence. And many times you are dealing with a third party who is a private party, and you have to prove your innocence to the private third party. And the first time, they literally told me, "Oh, you should have videotaped it." And so now I have learned, if there's anything that happens, I call the city immediately and ask, can you give me the incident report that is associated with this? Because I need that number to show that what is happening right now is they're diverting us over the line because there's an object in the road. And so there's so much that I don't think has been thought out about this yet. And then Denver has implemented this same program, the exact same program, 6 months ago. They've already stopped it and said we can't do it anymore because it's so bothersome. So if we're going to have it, can we at least look at what the problems were in Denver to get in front of the issues, and then can we have an actual person to talk to prove our innocence?
So I'm going to recommend that you talk to one of our local city council people. Okay. Are you willing to do that?
The appropriate place, but it will make a better place because it's going to be infuriating once it starts.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And there's one in the room here. Okay. Great. Thank you. A question back in the room.
Yes. Can you speak a little bit to the outcomes that you would like to see from these conversations and how you will archive, document, keep a record of the suggestions, the visions, the solutions that are proposed that come out of these conversations?
So the answer to the second part of your question is this is being recorded. Everybody's comments are being recorded.
Well, I'm talking about, you had mentioned breaking into smaller groups.
We're going to do that in a
having
moment.
Conversations.
Right.
What is it? So out of those conversations, hopefully we'll have deeper, more intimate discussions around advancing our future of the city. How is there a process for recording, documenting, archiving the outcomes of those conversations?
We're not going to be able to. We're not going to be able to archive those conversations. We're going to have reporting out of those conversations by each of the groups. But that's as good as it's going to get. We're hoping that what we do here with all of this is some level of inspiration for people that kind of want to take a next step in their own lives around what they can do about moving forward. And so we want to elevate the nature of the conversation to a different way of how we talk to one another. And then we want to be able to, and Carol kind of alluded to it, was to try to get people to think about, is running for office something that I want to consider doing? Is something that's something that is important for me in terms of, because we're not seeing, a lot of us who talked about putting this together aren't seeing maybe the level of quality that we would like to see in people who are running for office. I'll put it that way.
I will say, if we do small groups from now on, we'll make sure we have some worksheets that you can write down, and
Thank
we
you.
will
Okay.
get that reported and
All right.
and turned
Okay.
in.
So that, Rick, do you have a question?
Yeah, Brandon and Tim, you both brought up issues regarding growth, which I consider to be critical, and what you both talked about, growing up or growing out, open space and so forth. When I was in school in Boulder 50 years ago, there was something called the Danish Plan. And Boulder, being the idealistic place that it is and was, wanted to create a community that was ideal and in terms of population. And of all things, they decided on San Jose, California, 100,000 people. Of course, San Jose is triple that now, but so they implemented the Danish Plan, which it seems to me has been relatively successful because Boulder has suppressed their growth. My understanding, though, was that one of the main reasons was because Boulder as a city is squished between the Flatirons and the Mesa, and elongated community providing services was more problematic. Longmont doesn't, of course, have that problem, but it's interesting, and I'm putting this to you because now we're at 100,000 people. And in terms of growth, what do you think are the most important issues in the grand scheme of things?
Well, just first a reflection on the Danish Plan. The house Brandon was able to purchase,
I'm sorry?
the house Brandon was able to purchase that he mentioned
Yeah.
was because of the Danish Plan. He couldn't afford a home in Boulder, and Longmont became the affordable housing community, as did Louisville, Lafayette, Superior, all became the affordable housing solution for Boulder. That's how we got to where we are. Boulder now is trying to figure out what to do with available space, not building out, but building up, going vertical, and having to work through all those issues around sight lines and my view corridor and all that stuff. Because Boulder, the leadership in Boulder recognizes they are getting older and whiter when they need to be younger and more diverse. Yeah. Right? So I mentioned earlier, that child care and child care deserts are a real issue. In a conversation with Boulder County Commissioners a short time ago, they pointed out to me that, well, Tim, the population in Boulder is actually decreasing. We're not going to need more child care. And it's like, well, the reason you don't need more child care is you've created an environment where young families cannot afford to live here. So if you want to live in a community of old, white, rich people, find a home in Boulder. If you want to live in the real world, come join the rest of us trying to figure out how to make it livable for families who would like to raise their children here. See, personally, Rick, I don't see the Danish Plan as a solution to anything. I see it as a problem to a lot of things. And up and down in California, community after community adopted the same damn approach that Paul Danish introduced when he was a city council member in Boulder. And if we don't come to grips with the valuing of placemaking, of places for families, easy transportation, with an eye on I'm not suggesting that we're not concerned about the environment. We are. We can do both. If we don't balance that equation, we're going to look way more like Boulder than we do Longmont right now over the next generation. And I think that would be a terrible mistake. Crossroads, whoever asked that question, that's the crossroad.
Thanks for the question. I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction, but something Tim said in his opening remarks when he was talking about the collective action, the ability to make decisions and move forward collectively as a community to make some of these investments in our future. I think that's something that our city council needs to work on, to be real honest. You look at other organizations, the school district is working very well. You look at the school board, they all get along very well. They communicate very well, they share ideas, they process information, ask a lot of questions, and they work together in a very functional way. I mean, it's a great example for how representative government can actually work. And as a result, the school district is thriving, right? Because of that functionality at the very top. I think we need to make sure we have a city council that can work the same way. Right? And over the last 10, 15 years, I'm not sure we always did, right? If we want to move together collectively as a community, I think we need to have a council who's willing to put aside their differences and figure out what can we agree on and how can we move our city forward. I go through my personal pet peeves, making left turns, whatever it is, right? But at some level, we elect members to the city council to go through that list and figure out what the priorities are, and then take collective action to address those issues on our behalf. So our job is our mission, right? Mission impossible. Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to get people to the polls and elect people who are going to work together in a very functional way.
I'll give this back to you, Mike. And I should have said this earlier when I first stood up in terms of gifts to the community. Brandon mentioned his home. I think the St. Vrain Valley School District is an incredible gift to this community. Taxpayers in every community pay taxes for their schools. Very few have school districts like this one. And as Brandon's talking about the cohesiveness, and I'm certain they don't agree on everything, but the cohesiveness of the school board and the leadership of Don and senior leadership in the school district, we have the benefit, in addition to an engaged community, probably is not just the best school district in Colorado, one of the best school districts in the United States. And we ought to continue to support and publicly acknowledge and express our appreciation for the extraordinary work that everybody in the system does, but it starts at the top. Tell Don I said that.
I will. It's on tape. I guess it's not tape anymore, right?
All right. So we got about 15, 20 minutes left. I'm going to move forward here with small groups.
We have one more question.
Now we're going to move forward with small groups because we don't have a lot of time right now. So anyway, you were each in a small group. You each have a table, or if you want to join another table, and then answer one of these questions. You're each table answer one of these questions, and Tom, I know you want to ask your question, but then in about 5 to 7 minutes, we're going to have tables report out. So Tom, go ahead.
The discussion
Go ahead.
about growth and expansion, is there any ultimate? What is the ultimate insight that says the growth and people coming to Longmont, that the acceptance of expansion and growth needs to be here? I have some issues with Envision Longmont, the Danish plan. Envision Longmont has some contradictions. Whose idea is it that Longmont will take in all of these people, and why we'll do the growth or the vertical density changes? Whose idea and whose endorsement is it? What's the supreme being that's said we're going to do this?
Hang on, I'm just going to say that's like week 4, session 4, session 5. Make sure you're here. It talks about
Come back in week 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be-
so
we'll be-
for 5 to 7 minutes, answer one of those questions, folks. Your table. And if you're not with a table, now get with a table.
Sit down there. Sit down at this table. This one will be good.
What are you willing to do? I think one is, what's the cross? You want to get to the base. What is it? It's not just the population. The change in population that's coming our way. Demographic changes.
The problem we're going to have with this is that we're shooting faces against the white background. It's also, I mean, you could do it in post.
No, in the future, it's a tough call for Sergio. We got to bring white in with a Cardellini climate up there. It's up to you. There's no good solution to this. You notice right away. And I was pursuing it, trying to see if the light bulbs would go on. It wouldn't have helped. So.
Really cool.
But I'm fascinated by it. They said they turned the AC on, and I thought I felt it, but it didn't really kick in. There's no way they can have this through the summer if the AC doesn't work. So we need anyway, it seems like we need the other is pretty well. PA was a huge win. We know everybody.
You know, you see a lot of the same.
That's Diane and Chris, right?
Yeah. Yes. There's not really nothing we can do about it. There's really nothing we can do about it. I don't want it turned off and everything like that. So there'll be.
Youngest member of our group. So for the next one, I'll work out.
We don't need that.
Yeah, well, we need it mobile. So we'll work out a way to run it through one of those little square boxes. So I've drawn a metal blank on the brand. So we get that. That worked out really well.
It's a big turn.
That is the crux. You're 40%. What's the average person in your What's the average community? Hey, I'm not so sure. I love this comment about management. I love this comment about
Yeah, we can have a larger conversation about how we've commodified the elected officials in this country. And they become kind of like commodities. And so Yeah.
It all feels impossible.
Part of the other conversation we're going to have down the road is how does leadership show up differently? And because the idea of voting for our leaders in a democracy, voting is a feature, but it's not the most important feature of democracy. There's so many other aspects to democracy that
One thing you'd like to bring up with Eric is the summer, AC pushing on, the black hole is I'm guessing it probably worked. Because obviously they have beer drinkers. Not terribly warm.
Yeah, no, it's going to be warm. You're right.
We won't be able to afford to maintain all that. Silly me, focused on logistics.
Okay, everybody. All right, we're going to have some reporting out. All right. Hello. I want the power back here. All right. Okay. All right, we're going to start around the room, and we want to hear. We're going to start with that table where Tom and his group are at. What question did you, Carol? Do you have a mic? You have a mic? Can you, go ahead.
What do you have over here? You have a consensus?
I know, there's a lot coming at you tonight.
So,
Beth, go ahead.
So we had a really nice discussion about congestion and parking and traffic and trying to orient it to what could be possible instead of focusing on the problems. We talked about holistic housing development, which takes into consideration things like parking and mass transportation and outdoor recreation and connectivity to the rest of Longmont. Does anybody else want to add? That was, okay, they're saying that was good.
So you covered all the bases, and so in one sentence, tell us what your thoughts are around possibility.
Possibilities are endless.
Can you add a semicolon?
But planning is essential.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Thank you. Let's go. Let's travel across the room. Eric and Dan and Heath and Jake's and Rick and Tim's table. Who's the spokesperson?
Who's the best person to summarize it? Steve, you're talking. Steve, what's our crossroads?
I'm taking the fifth. Somebody else go with this one. We were kind of all over the board. We got into capping growth versus not capping growth, like the Danish plan. Does it work? Tim, thank you for your point.
Was that a crossroad question?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's the crossroad that we're.
The crossroad is what are we going to do with our growth?
Yeah, 5-year plan. So the real question is, how do we grow? We know growth is going to be an issue. We're not going to shut the door, tell people they can't come in. So what does smart growth look like?
Okay, so that's the crossroad for you.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, you don't have open space programs if there isn't growth. I mean, look at Weld County up north to the Wyoming line. Do they have an open space program? Do they have a growth program?
They have a lot of houses.
No, or do they?
They have a lot of cattle and sheep.
Yeah, in Nebraska. So again, I think part of that, and we said,
okay,
there's a need for growth.
Okay,
but
so
it's
you're
not smart growth.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to go to this table right here. What question did you talk to?
We started off with number 3, about how to help create the Longmont you want to be. And I think we just focused on taking care of your own neighborhood. So reaching out to your neighbors and, for instance, organizing some group of interested people to take care of a local greenway or a pathway that, instead of depending upon the city to do it and walking by what we see all the time in the ditch or on the park or on the grass, that we take a little responsibility for our neighborhoods and commit to them and keeping them a little bit cleaner.
I know a couple of people, maybe 3 people at your table who are highly committed in many ways to this community. So it doesn't surprise me that question number 3 was your question. Thank you. All right, this table right here.
We discussed the...
Which question?
The gift.
Which
So
question?
number 2, what
Okay.
gift has Longmont given you? And we talked about like the community and how much we love the safety that Longmont feels. It has brought us the I don't know, camaraderie with our communities and the neighborhoods that we are. The great police department, the people that we've been able to build families here, the beauty of our natural surroundings, and the fact that we really love living here is where we're at. Yeah.
How many of all of us have traveled to some other part of the world and came back and said, this is about as close to paradise as we
We're
can
just
get?
so happy to be here. We'll be driving around and be like, God, it's so pretty here.
You bet.
We love it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to go to this table, then this table, and then that you'll be last. So go ahead. You're a spokesperson? Looks like you're really enthusiastic
Apparently.
about that. Okay.
This is the weirdest microphone. So we kind of talked a little bit about which one to talk about for a little bit, and then settled on, I think, Crossroads. We all kind of agreed that this is just such a wonderful place to live. And one of the things that we discussed, and I thought it was a really neat thing, is we do have a lot of building that's going in, and we have a lot of units that are going into town, but they're being built by corporations that are out-of-state corporations, and they're apartments, and that is a really difficult way to support growth in our community, where we're not having people are coming in who are a little bit more transient, they're not really putting roots in. The money that they're paying is going somewhere else, and we talked about the idea of possibly some rent-to-own type programs that could come into effect. And the other thing is having the industry in our area that supports the opportunities for people to be able to buy and qualify for mortgages, and having businesses like Left Hand that are a wonderful business that supports people, but having that those really have to go hand in hand. We have to have business and opportunities and places for people to live.
Beautiful. Thank you. This table right, okay, we'll just, go ahead, that couple, go ahead.
Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is number 3, as this is more a statement. I did not know about the Longmont Public Media. I've lived here 13 years, and I'm shocked that I did not know about it. And so, yeah. So first thing is what I'm offering is, I'm going to go find out how I can do more outreach and get more people to be informed about, a great service. Because I kind of scrolled through a little bit here while we were sitting here, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Anyway.
Well, that was a gift you received tonight.
It was a gift I received, so I guess I'm going through all 3.
Right.
Okay, so Crossroads. We've talked a lot about growth. For me, the crossroad that Longmont is at right now, it's not the growth here, it's the growth between here and the jobs. This has been a commuter town for as long as I know. And there's probably one of you guys probably knows the number about the percentage of people who live here who commute out of Longmont. 50%. Yeah, see, I figured it was higher than 40. So we don't have a control over the mass transportation and the connectivity. It's very difficult. As somebody who's for 20 years commuted to the airport, I can tell you the access points to I-25, 13 years here, but 20 years total. The access points to I-25 are very arduous to get to. And then once you get to them, there's not much that we as Longmonsters can do to change that, whatever the state's gonna do. So my question is, how does Longmont change its identity from a commuter town to a town where we're gonna attract jobs, where people can come here, live here, and work in this town?
Well said, well said. And you throw that out as a possibility, don't you? As a vision, as here's what we can do differently.
Well, it really should be. I mean, let's be realistic. We're never gonna get the light rail here, not in my lifetime, not in probably any of our lifetimes. Right? So to sit here and say that this can be sustainable as a commuter town, it's probably not the truth. And it's not our growth, it's the growth in between here that's going to make that very arduous.
Yep. All right. Thought out well. Thank you for that. One last table here. Over here. Okay.
Number 3, it's so obvious, roundabouts, not lights. It's already a solution in other parts of this world, and this gentleman over here will work with the city council to make it happen because it's better all the way.
So okay. So this table's okay with this table's okay with right turns here, right? Okay, all right. And right roundabouts, okay. All right. And so he volunteered, is that the truth? You're willing to, okay. Anybody willing to join his committee?
No, I'm a bike rider.
He's a bike rider, all right.
We'll make roundabouts safe for bike riders.
Okay, any final words, any final perspectives from the group? Yes, sir.
I would like to comment that for me, a core issue is intergenerational responsibility. That my generation holds a responsibility to empower younger generation with the agency to create their own future, to have a habitable planet, have a place to live, to build on their community. I look around this group right now, right here, how many younger folks do I see? Once again, what I'm seeing is older generations, old enough to the reins of power and deciding what will happen for the younger generation.
All right. Well, the older generation's here. Maybe the older generation can say, we're willing to join in on that effort of informing our younger community about what's possible.
Okay, I'm just going to say then you have a responsibility to invite 2 younger people to the next session.
There you go. There you go.
All right?
All right.
And we are past our time. We like to be timely. So
okay, so thank you all for tonight.
hang on,
Appreciate
I just want to say you're in the right room. Thank you to Left Hand and SOSSAS and
See you all June 12th.
see you June 12th. Thanks for coming.
I'm going to be partially moderating next week or in 2 weeks. And if you're interested in the open space and the growth and the interface of those, it's going to be specifically about how we preserve our open space and accommodate growth at the same time. That's going to really be the core issue. And we're going to start off with about a 20-minute video to watch. Well, we're going to start off with some rules and how to harmonize conversations. But after that, we're going to
Actively listen.
and hear what people say rather than just process and figure your response before they're even done talking. Right? That was what Stephanie is really good at.
Stephanie will be
so
here.
Please tell your friends and neighbors and everybody else if they're interested in how are we going, and it starts in Longmont, but it's everywhere. How do we deal with those things that are in conflict, and how do we harmonize solutions? How do we find leadership that's going to get us there?
Very good. Thank you.
Yay.
With that, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Left Hand, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Longmont Public Media.
And Longmont Public Media.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Brandon.